Thank you for inviting me today. My name is Kate Hubler, and I am the Program Director for Financial Literacy at the YWCA in Berkeley, Oakland. And as you can see, our mission is eliminating racism and empowering women. So the Financial Literacy Program at Berkeley, Oakland began with a conference called the Young Women and Money Conference. It began in 2008, and since then has hosted approximately 1,650 attendees. The conference focuses on young women, especially of color and from low-income backgrounds from Oakland. The topics include goal setting, investing, salary negotiation, and credit. And we continue to serve this demographic of young women and the community through the conference and through monthly workshops taught by professionals. We received a lot of positive feedback from the conference. People were very excited because they'd never heard the information before. It boosted their confidence, and it felt almost like really just a way to provide enthusiasm for investing in themselves. And so there were a lot of return attendees. But one of the negative things in the evaluation was they really wish that they had been able to get this information sooner in high school. So we made a change and created the high school program in 2011. And I came on as program director in fall of 2015, so I'm quite new to the program myself. The high school program focuses on public high schools in Oakland Unified School District. We serve McClymonds High School, Castlemont High School, Coliseum College Preparatory Academy, Oakland High School, Oakland Technical High School, and Skyline High School. There are 31,147 students total in OUSD. It's a very racially diverse demographic, primarily Latino, African American, and Asian students. 30.6% are English learners, 49.5% speak a language other than English at home, and there are 50 native languages spoken in the district. 73.4% of students receive a free or reduced lunch, and 10.1% of students are in the special education program. So the program is a collaboration between teachers in OUSD and myself, where they invite us into the classroom for a 7 to 8 week course. One of the big challenges that I personally face is getting in touch with teachers who are very frequently very busy with their traditional courses and all the issues that come up with students. So this is one of the biggest challenges that I face. I teach in the classroom with the assistance of the volunteers from UC Berkeley. We're actually located across the street from UC Berkeley. So we come during their normal class time, which means that the teachers have to trust that our coursework is important enough to take away from what they're normally doing. And it's a benefit for volunteers because they're gaining leadership experience and they're exposed to the diversity of the Bay Area. I'm not sure if any of you have been to UC Berkeley, but it can be a little bit of a bubble. So it's really nice getting them out into the Oakland area and seeing what the rest of the Bay Area is like. The course topics, basically we're focusing on goal setting, understanding beliefs about money, the stock market, which is something that I get a lot of pushback on because these students will never invest, interest rates, saving, credit, supply and demand, and career in college. So classes this year have included a pre-calculus class, English classes, a business seminar, and government and economics classes. Currently we're working with an ELL, or English Language Learner class, and a special education class with modified curriculums. So it's been really interesting to me to note that generally the government economic classes, where I'm working at least, are not necessarily going over most of these topics, and a lot of them don't even go over necessarily like the stock market at all. So some of the methods that are used to teach the course, just to kind of adapt to people's different learning styles, are a visual goal chart, so they can put an image up of basically like what their goals are and kind of map it based on if it's a short-term goal or long-term goal. Frequently I model a skill and then we practice it. So for example, with that goals, there's a SMART goal system that we use. So I teach them how to make a kind of imprecise goal more clear by giving it action steps and giving it a deadline, and then they do that for themselves and modify their actual goals. I use presentations with note-taking. We have group activities and discussions, reflection on idea through writing, and lots of games. Games work very well. One of the games that we do is a stock market game that we adapted called Awesome Island. And that helps students learn to budget and understand risk associated with the stock market. It teaches them arithmetic, budgeting, interest rates, risk, and the value of higher education. So this is one of the sheets. This is the budget. Basically, they get an income, and then they have to decide how much they're spending on their housing and their food and entertainment. And then they add up all their expenses, and they subtract that from their income, and they get their leftovers. They can also make a decision to go to college, and they spend $75,000 on that, and then they end up making more income. So it actually generally does show up better over time, just like in the real world, with higher salaries related to higher education. And then the investing portion was modified to also teach them about rates of return, and kind of, not that it's the interest rate, but teach them a little bit about how that works. So they use their leftover money to either put into a savings account, where we're talking about emergency savings, or they can invest it in the stock market, and then they get different rates of returns based on chance. So that is a very popular game, and many of them have never, as mentioned previously by other speakers, never done a budget before, and it's a more practical way of kind of understanding risk. So for assessments, all the coursework is graded by their teachers, generally for participation grade. And I give them a pre-test to see kind of what they know before we start. And at the end, they take an open note post-test, which is graded. So I kind of try to give a range with the assessment of something really simple like which of these is a credit score, and questions that require critical thinking. So here's just an example from one class for their pre-test. So the first question is, you get an email from your bank and it seems to have many typos. It asks you to follow a link to sign into your bank account. Is this probably an attempt at phishing? And this is for the pretest. So 82% got that, which makes me pretty happy. That's not necessarily the same for all classes. And then another question. So when buying a home, you either want a loan with a lower interest rate so you can have lower payments, or a loan with a higher interest rate so you can have lower payments. So we got 60% getting that right, which is good. They have no prior knowledge, but obviously I care more about them understanding the basic concepts of interest rates, and rather than like understanding the math, although we do that a little bit as well. Some of the challenges that I face are, a lot of the students deal with personal factors affecting their ability to focus, which are sometimes called adverse childhood experiences. So whatever kind of trauma is in their life, it makes it difficult for them. And then some of the skills needed in college they struggle with are note-taking. So like one way I've adapted that is providing fill-in-the-blank notes for the PowerPoint so they can just fill it in with keywords. I notice a lot of them feel really uncomfortable talking in class and asking questions, and then just critical thinking skills like how to create a goal and how to make that go from like I'd like to own a business to okay, I'm going to research a business, and then I'm going to talk to people and taking action steps. Another big challenge is the math skills. So the game that we use for the stock market game requires adding and subtracting, and a lot of them are not able to know if it's going to be a negative number or a positive number. So that's one thing I help them with, or like converting a percentage to a decimal. So I think that this struggle that I face is probably faced by a lot of educators. It's basically, okay, are we going to make it hard so that they're ready for college, or are we going to make it easier so that it's something they understand? So kind of trying to go into the middle where you're pushing them but not expecting them to go more than they can. And I was asked, what are some suggestions for the future? For our program, we would want to increase how many students we're helping. I think all the other nonprofits speaking today, doing work out in the community, all of those should continue to do their work and hopefully expand. And I also think it makes sense to either have like a required elective course for a semester long, or to work it into economics. I think economics is obviously it's the most obvious choice, but it's not actually happening right now. And I also think that I've been hearing that it should be worked into math, and I think that should definitely be happening, especially with talking about like exponential graphs. You can factor in interest rates there. So there's a lot of opportunities. It's just a matter of actually the teachers having all the information that they need, and having the incentive, I think, through having it be a state requirement to work it in.
Thank you, Kay. We appreciate the testimony. I want to welcome Assemblymember Pat O'Donnell. Thank you for stopping by. A couple things just kind of popped to my mind. You said that when students they talk about you talk about investment with them and wanting to go over that, they say no, I'm never going to invest. Is that because they believe that Wall Street is corrupt and so they don't want to contribute to that, or is it because they just really don't understand how to and it scares them, and so because they don't know it, they don't want to even deal with it?
Actually, the students are interested. I mean, not amazingly interested, but they're interested in the stock market investing. Most of the pushback that I've had about teaching them about investing in the stock market has been from their teachers, who say that they're never going to become investors. And I think that is underestimating their abilities to achieve in the future.
Why do you think the teachers saying they're never going to become investors?
I think because of the socioeconomic position that the students are in. It's a fairly low-income school district, and I guess as a result of that, it's not a priority in their minds. Many of the econ classes don't teach about the stock market. They're focusing more on poverty issues, which are important as well. But I do think basically understanding the stock market, not in depth, but just understanding that there is a stock market, that companies raise money by selling stocks, that kind of thing is really important for every American to understand.
And I think that this is what's really kind of part of my concern and the crux of the conversation when it comes to financial literacy is whether it's a state mandate or not, is that if you do go into different school districts and there are going to be different opinions, and that's a very concerning opinion, that if a teacher believes that, well, because you're in a lower income community, they're just not going to become investors, so let's not go ahead and bother teaching them how to do it. That's a concern as to something I feel that the state would have to remedy, or at least provide leadership on when it comes to those types of issues. And the other question is, how old are the kids that you're working with usually?
Oh, juniors and seniors.
Juniors and seniors.
Yeah.
And so when you work with them, they clearly know nothing about much of the things that you're asking them.
That's kind of what I'm trying to assess with the pretest. I mean, it really depends. I think it's a lot harder than, say, an English class. So students are usually, as long as they're like living in the United States for K through 12, they're getting English every year. And so there's kind of a assessment over time of how students are doing. But with these financial topics, there's not really any introduction of them formally. So some of the students have parents that have businesses or who are very just financially literate, and so they're teaching their kids. And so some of them, specifically one school that I work at that's a higher income, they all knew what phishing was, and they didn't want to hear about it. But most of the students are not getting that information. So I think it's really difficult because you can't tell what students are going to know and not going to know, because it's basically coming from real world experience. So I just assume that none of them will know the basic concepts so that they all get it.
Well, and it's really scary because a lot of our economy is propped up on people investing in the in Wall Street and investing in companies, and if you have an entire generation that's growing up, well, they're not going to be investors, and so don't teach them that. Well, then that has long-term economic impacts, not just for the state of California, but also for the country. Mr. O'Donnell, if you want to say something?
Yeah, as one who taught economics just short of 14 months ago, I taught, you don't have to teach investing, financial literacy inside your economics class, but you can, and really you should, because they're not getting it anywhere else. And in my classroom, you walked out of there knowing what a stock was through the stock market project. You knew what a mutual fund was. You knew what a 401k was, a 537, a 403b, even, quite frankly, getting more down the, more technical. But, and I never heard anyone say at my high school that these kids shouldn't learn this because they're never going to be investors. I find that hard to believe, and wherever that's happening, they need to clean out the leadership of that school yesterday. But it is a fact that you're going to have to invest if you're going to retire one day in this country and even beyond. You can't rely on Social Security. You can't rely on a pension anymore. Even if you have a pension, I'll have a teacher's pension at one point. It's not at all going to be enough to survive. So financial literacy is a fact of life. I thank you for bringing this topic up. It should be a mandate, quite frankly. In my opinion, it should again be tucked into the economics class. Is the best place for it. It's where, quite frankly, you have the most room for it. Not always do they have the time in a math class setting, but I think also in an economics class it matches the topic. It falls underneath that umbrella, and also gives you a chance to explore other topics within economics and apply the concept of financial literacy. So your comment about where should it go, I would think economics. That's just my opinion.
Well, thank you, Mr. O'Donnell, for your comments. And then just a question to you, being a teacher of financial literacy. One of the conversations that we've been engaging in is, when it should start. It's been brought up. It should be K through 12, be taught every single year, whether it's a dedicated class or just kind of worked into the curriculum of an already existing class. Because as Mr. Superintendent pointed out, if you want a new course, it's going to cost more money, and very rarely do we get any more money when it comes to those types of things. But in order to gain something, you also have to lose something. And so, my idea was, okay, well, you have an overall goal through K through 12. You come up with an idea of what they need to learn, and you just teach it literally from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think if we're the concept of teaching it every year, I think is going to require a much broader discussion. Mm-hmm. And the superintendent's correct. If you're going to add something on, typically you should take something off. I would just argue, looking at the framework, or rather the standards for economics, I think there may be ample room inside an economics class. I think he may agree. These may fit within the economics class, because I know in my own economics class I kind of shaped it. It was flexible enough. The curriculum was flexible enough where I could tuck a few things in there so that students could understand financial literacy. And financial literacy, quite frankly, is a very broad topic. It's not just investing in the stock market. It's not, balancing a checkbook, which no one does anymore. Your computer does it for you. But it's also it's a broad array of investment options and commodities, et cetera. How do all those kinds of things work? Real estate, how does that work? When you buy a car, you pay interest. You get a subprime mortgage. What does that mean? Don't get one of those, right? So all those topics fit underneath that umbrella. I think economics, and that's one voice.
Right. Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. We're going to move on to our last panelist, Mr. Brent Neisser, Senior Director of Strategic Programs and Alliances, National Endowment for Financial Education.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman and Assemblyman O'Donnell. Great to be with you and your colleagues and staff members. We'll change it up a little bit and talk about the college space, and we actually have some great news here in California. Our private foundation, nonprofit, nonpartisan, self-funded, is based in Denver. We've been around over 30 years. We have programs in high schools and in 900 colleges around the country. The program we'll talk about today is Cash Course. Think for a minute, if you're a college president, you want to bring financial literacy to your student body, but how do you do it? This takes funding space. Do you get an on-campus sponsor? What about commercialization? What about keeping it up to date? What about a trusted source? We had many requests to our foundations from colleges around the country, and we ended up developing and piloting Cash Course in 2007. And right now we're in over 900 colleges around the country. And here's an overview. It's a free online source. It's co-branded with our foundation in each college. You even get to put up their college colors on the homepage. It's commercial-free, unbiased content. There is no advertising, no sponsor, no commercial connection. And this gives the college leadership confidence that they can move this through the various offices of their campus, which would be financial aid, career services, alumni associations, even parents' clubs. We provide promotional materials, and it can be used in classrooms, multiple departments, and even on the administrative side. So what does it look like in California? 8 Cal State universities are signed up for it right now, 9 in the UC system. And in 2014, as part of a national review, we were selected by the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office to be the financial literacy provider for 113 California community colleges. So that's been going on for about 2 years. It's really a 5-year time frame. And what's in Cash Course? Here are the topics we cover, 6 areas: basic money management, paying for education, purchases. We have things in there like, what if you own a pet in college? What about spring break? Even go to the granular issues real young people are facing, as well as older students. So we do have special information for those who are parents in college, starting your own business. You're having a child. What's going to happen financially with that? So these are key critical inflection points in people's lives. We provide a variety of interactive multimedia tools, quizzes, videos, worksheets, kind of a Cash Course planner where you can bookmark things, know where you started, take quizzes, say this is of important to me, some of the articles, and even access to financial experts. So there are administrators on each campus, often in the financial aid office or student affairs, perhaps other areas, that are our liaison with the campus. We provide them workshops that they can put on. They can do things when students are registering, kind of a student life type example course. They can create assignments with faculty members. They also get a monthly e-newsletter, and we do live webinars where they talk to other administrators from public and private nonprofit schools around the country as to what works, what isn't, what are the trends you're seeing on campus, what's some kind of new area. And that helps our staff update the material. And we're like a hub to keep this current and keep moving it out. So here's what Cash Course looks like. Here's one of the key topic pages about get organized with a budget. You'll see on the right we have related resources, a budget wizard, calculators, worksheets, and occasionally from these article sources links to government and nonprofit organizations where they can do a deeper dive in those areas. You'll see again on the left the menu about the basics of the topics that are covered in Cash Course. Here's what the financial experts, well, these are 2 live financial experts from around the country that receive questions daily from students. Those are often archived and searchable. So this helps with the trends and kind of the immediate needs, but the answers are made in a generic way. And on the privacy issue, since we take no money, we don't want credit cards, we don't want social security numbers, students can log in just with a password they create and identify their school. So it's really a safe spot to learn and get organized. And here's a dashboard for the administrators. The profile they set up for their school, they set up their sites, they can move assignments out, they can work with faculty, they can track analytics and see who's actually enrolled in the program. So classes can enroll or individuals as well. Again, where to put this in place: orientation, tutoring. Somebody's having challenges with a student loan. We're not a default prevention program, but we add value to those that exist and are really perhaps more holistic than beyond the student loan space as to what students are facing in their financial lives on campus. And again, it can be campus, part-time, even distance learning. So what we provide is to let the campus professionals focus their time and money on implementation. We update the content. We listen to students, listen to the experts. And it's available to all students regardless of their borrowing staff. And we have a small staff to keep this up to date. I would like to mention our past chair of our foundation is Alex Gonzalez, President Emeritus of Sacramento State University, and a current board member is Francisco Rodriguez, who's chancellor of the LA Community College District and formerly the president of one of the 113 community colleges. And then nationally, we have 125 California schools enrolled, which is 13% of the schools that are in Cash Course. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it, and I think it's great that you're working with these students and have this kind of dashboard set up so that they can, at least for themselves, figure some things out. I think moving forward, when it comes to this topic of discussion, it was important to not only hear from different groups that are working at least outside of education, but then also within education, hearing what school districts, the state, California Department of Education, other groups are working to do to help kids understand, help kids be financially literate, so that they can leave school and at least our public education system confident that they can tackle the world ahead of them. I mean, you take a look at our last large recession. Imagine had majority of individuals in the country actually been financially literate and understood money, and that as much as it might be great to own multiple homes on a salary, that maybe you shouldn't own multiple homes, or buying subprime mortgages or participating in that, that we wouldn't have had as bad of a recession as we did. And I think that it isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when we have another recession. But it also but it can differentiate in terms of severity. And we have an entire generation that I feel is coming of age that hasn't had the proper financial literacy education that they need to not only be responsible for themselves, but also collectively responsible for the greater good of everyone in this country. I mean, there are so many different levels of financial literacy, whether it's yourself, your parents, and how that affects you. I mean, how many folks are out there really thinking about their parents when they can't take care of themselves? Who is that going to fall on? What's going to fall on the kids? And I don't think there's really any idea of how much that costs to take care of someone, either for yourself at home or within a facility. It's extremely expensive.
Right. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, just to comment, that next recession could not only vary in severity, but in kind of area of emphasis. So we had the housing, it could be student loans, a retirement crisis, a stock market implosion. And by holistic education, I think many of the panelists have talked about, you prepare folks with a filter and almost a defensive screen as to what might hit them, and they'll understand that piece, at least be able to connect it to something they might understand even better, and work out a kind of a defensive and an offensive strategy to tackle that. One thing the Foundation National Endowment for Financial Education also does, we have a retirement platform that is also, we're building community workshops for, called My Retirement Paycheck, identifying the 8 decisions everybody needs to think about as they ramp up and face retirement. And this could be very supportive to those underprepared family members that you so adequately, emotionally talked about earlier today. So thanks.
Well, no, thank you for the comments, and point well taken. I absolutely, completely agree with the point that you just made. But I think that was the goal of today's hearing. So I want to thank all of you for your comments as a panel. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and open up the committee to public comments. And please state your name and affiliation, if there is any, for the record.
My name is Frank Connolly. I don't have any organizational affiliation. I'm a serial entrepreneur. My girlfriend happens to be testifying. However, I did want to bring up something in the discussions that I've noticed lacking that was sort of surprising to me as a fellow board member of this organization. I noticed that the largest and oldest provider of financial literacy education is not represented here. Are you familiar with JA?
I am not.
All right. Well, Junior Achievement is a 50-year-old, 60-year-old organization dedicated to financial literacy in the United States. In Northern California alone last year, they serviced 100,000 students. They have a scaffolded, age-appropriate K through 12 educational system that works with all these issues. And I think it's important to bring them into the conversation. I'd also like to add that I think there are a lot of organizations, nonprofit organizations, that can provide resources to our schools. One of the things that concerns me about legislation mandating additional requirements into the school system, our schools are already struggling to deal with students that really aren't prepared for school when they show up day one in kindergarten. By mandating additional things into the curriculum, I think we're creating additional difficulty for our teachers that's not necessary. And I think volunteer organizations like JA, nonprofit volunteer organizations, can provide additional resources to our school systems. It's a much more efficient way of achieving this. I mean, it's easy to say to to a teacher, hey, we've got a volunteer who's had a background check, who's professionally sophisticated in this area, who can provide this kind of work. We'll give you the break to do some grading or whatever, and still get the students taught in this way. So that was the only comment I wanted to make.
Great. Thank you for your testimony. Any other members of the audience like to provide any public comment and testimony? Okay, at the same, you may step down. I appreciate it. And we're going to go ahead and conclude the hearing. But before, I think the overall goal of the hearing moving forward was to try and find a solution as to how we can move forward on this issue of financial literacy and where it is, where its place is. I think my concern to our public comments point, my concern is that we haven't done enough to modernize the way we educate kids, and we haven't done enough to modernize the curriculum in terms of the way kids are taught and what they're taught. Tech literacy and financial literacy are two things that are extremely important in today's economy, and two important factors in determining the success of a student moving forward in their life and being an active participatory member of society. And so the goal is, on the state level, is you have two ways. You can hope and pray that those on the local level, see it as something that's important, do it on their own, or you get involved on the state level and, whether it's not a mandate, strongly suggest that this is something that needs to happen. And so I think that it's our goal to find a solution. We've talked about it to the point where you meet with members and individuals that come in to talk to us about this issue, where we all agree that there's a problem. We all agree that something needs to change. It's just now we've come to the point where, okay, now what's the change? And we have to make that change. Change is never easy. We do not have a system that is easily changeable, or do not have a system that invites change, because the status quo is easy, it's comfortable, it's what we know. But again, that's what I saw as my job when I was elected, is to come up here and to challenge the status quo, to challenge the ideas of what people feel things are the way they are, and the idea of what they should be. I ran because I wanted to be the voice for the next generation, because I was young. I was 25 when I ran, 27 once I was elected, and I feel like this is something that is a hole in our system. I did take an economics class. I don't remember anything I learned in the economics class. I remember what I've learned through experience on my own, good or bad. I did not have a credit card until I was probably 25 years old, just because I was scared to death of a credit card. But at the same time, you need a credit card in order to build credit so that you can get a car loan one day, so you can own a home, and it takes time. I mean, one of the factors of determining your credit score is credit history. Well, if you don't have a long credit history, it's not a major piece of your credit score, but it's a determining factor in terms of the strength of your credit score. And most people, and I guarantee this, most kids think that because they don't have a credit card that, well, I don't have debt, so that means I have a good credit score. When that's not the case. You don't have any credit at all, which means you do not have a good credit score. But most people don't understand that, and I guarantee kids, and I know kids, they don't get that point. And so I think it is really incumbent upon us, as the eighth largest economy in the world. It goes back and forth. We're between 6 and 8, given this certain year. And that we should set the example moving forward. That California is a shining bright star in this great nation, and that what we do, if it can happen here, it can translate across the country, and we can start that. We can start that here in California, and we need to start that. And I think that we've heard testimony from amazing panelists that we had today, and we didn't have everybody, but we had what we could given the time that we had to do the job. That point out that there are programs that are out there. There's interest that is out there. There's obviously enough happening to determine that there is a great need for it. Now I think it's just up to the legislature to put their money where their mouth is, to do something that's going to be effective long term, and to not just shove it down everybody's throat just because we can. It's to actually work with individuals, understand where they're coming from, make it a partnership, and make it something that we've all collectively accomplished together because we understand the importance of it, rather than not taking the time, doing something without putting full time and attention into it and getting a mediocre product. That's not what we need. We need something that is sustainable long term. So I want to thank everybody for coming. Again, I want to thank our panelists. I'd like to thank staff, Mr. Dylan Hoffman, for coming, as well as the banking and finance staff, and my co-chair for today, Assemblymember DeBobney, for all his work that he does in the banking and finance world, as well as the members that showed up to participate in the hearing. I think that we've learned a lot. There's somewhere to move, and I look forward to the work ahead. Thank you so much, and I am so adjourning this meeting.